Well, hello there everybody. Thanks for clicking on this video and joining in what is a continuing conversation. First of all, I'd like to welcome aboard all the new subscribers and also to thank everybody for the comments that you've been leaving behind. I've been enjoying reading them and been enjoying seeing what all of you are doing in your endeavors to make homemade powder. Couple of the comments got me to thinking about something, and it has to do with making gunpowder using the CIA method, okay? And that got me to thinking about the nature of acetone, because I understand how it all works. You boil your water, you dissolve your potassium nitrate, that helps move the potassium nitrate into the charcoal when you mix it all together along with the sulfur, and then at that critical moment you introduce cold to sub-zero acetone, and it kind of like shocks everything into that one unit, and then you keep stirring it until it becomes a very hard slurry, and then you put it in some sort of cloth and wring it out. You're wringing out the excess acetone in the water, okay? And the one thing that occurred to me is I've yet to see anybody take that gunpowder after they've wrung out the excess acetone in water. I've yet to see anybody puck that underneath with a pucking die and a jack. Okay, I've yet to see that. I'm not saying it's not out there, I just have not seen it yet. What I've seen is everybody take that hard ball puck after wringing everything out and screening it and sizing it at that point and letting it dry. And everybody says, yes, you get a hotter burning gunpowder. Well, you would, because you've introduced a flammable, acetone. And acetone is a flammable, and I'm going to demonstrate that a little later in this video. Okay? But that got me to thinking about acetone. Okay? Calcium acetate. Now you can actually make your own acetone at home. It's just vinegar and eggshells. That's just the basics. And even your own body produces acetone. You urinate that out. So thus again, potassium nitrate's made from what? Okay, you guys have got it. So even the potassium nitrate in itself should have the elements of acetone, the flammability of it, okay? But that got me to thinking about making another batch of gunpowder. Now what I did is I milled up another 100 grams of my gunpowder, 75, 15, 11. I'm going to stick with that because I think it burns really well for my purposes. Now what I did is at about 8.5 hours, I stopped the mill, popped the lid, and a little more than half of the 100 grams was already compacting in the bottom of the jar, the container. So I took a stick and mixed it all up, ran it an additional hour, opened the lid, and once again, it was already compacting the bottom of this mill jar. So up until 12 hours, after about the 8.5 hour, up to 12 hours, every hour I stopped it and stirred it all up again, okay? Because there seems to be a prevailing thought when it comes to CIA gunpowder that the components are mixed better than if you were to put them in a ball mill. I don't know that that's necessarily true, or if somebody is just throwing out some maybe perhaps wishful thinking. But that's what I did, okay? And depending on what portion of the video has already been pre-recorded, I did decide to go ahead and use a 50-50 mixture of acetone and my groundwater, and you'll see it in the video. I distilled my own groundwater to get the minerals out, okay? And I did do a test burn on those little square pieces of metal, and you will see the results of that if you stick with this video to those points, up to that point in the timeline. So anyhow, without giving too much more of this all away, you'll see my first impression of the pucks with the 50% acetone and the 50% groundwater that I, distilled myself. And I still have a little bit more to do when I get it back here in the shop after everything thoroughly dries, and I'll let you know just how hard they really are. And you'll, but the thought in mind is, how is this gunpowder going to react, not using the CIA method, but putting a 50-50 mixture and pucking it under a bottle jack? That is what we all want to see, and that's what we're all going to see. And at this point, I will see you sometime throughout the video. I know, guys, you probably wanted to see what the bare metal looked like underneath that gunpowder with the different waters. Well, I did not use any cleaning solution. All I did was take a dry rag and my thumb and cleaned off the metal. Let me give you a close-up. There's the groundwater. That's after cleaning it up with just a dry rag and my thumb pressure. There's the city water. I gotta tell you right now, that's still the cleanest looking piece of metal. And there's the metal with the distilled water. There's the DW. So it looks to me, from right here, right now, that the distilled water and my groundwater leave the most particulates behind. I know I said I was going to give it a rest, but after thinking about it, I thought about something that I could try for myself, and I want to test this theory. I'm going to make a half a batch of gunpowder, but this time what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take my groundwater and I'm going to distill it. And I want to see for a fact if distilling my own groundwater leaves any minerals or any trace minerals behind. I know when I did the previous burn with the distilled water, they looked like there was some minerals or something left behind. Not wanting to completely trust buying stuff from the grocery store, I decided that I was going to distill my own water. So stay tuned for the burn test. So just to remain consistent, here's 40 grains of my homemade gunpowder with juniper as the charcoal, and this was pucked with my groundwater. Okay, minerals included. Alright, there's the burn, and you can see the little white specks left behind, which again, I'm still of the mind it's some of the potassium nitrate and perhaps some of the minerals from the groundwater. So I'm going to get reset up, and I'm going to do the same burn with the gunpowder that I distilled my groundwater myself. Okay, here we go. Well, guys, there's hardly any white specks left behind. Let me get resituated here and get you guys a side-by-side shot. Okay, the metal plate on the left is the gunpowder that I made with the groundwater, and you can see there's quite a bit left behind. And on the right is the gunpowder that I made with my groundwater that I took the time to distill, and you saw that previously. I think we can note there's a huge difference. And the other thing that I want to note off of memory, the gunpowder that I made previously with what I thought was distilled water, which was bought from the grocery store, was not completely purified, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to do a simple little test here with acetone. So I have a little bit of acetone in this cup. I'm going to light a match, and I'm going to hold the flame close, and you watch what it does. See? That's what your gunpowder is doing when you infuse it with acetone. The fumes, as your combustion begins to burn in the bottom of your gun barrel, that acetone adds some flammability to it. So yeah, naturally it would burn faster and it would burn hotter. So now I'm going to go ahead and puck that 100 grams of my homemade gunpowder with juniper just to stay consistent, and then once that dries, I'll turn the camera back on and then we'll see where we're at that point. Whoops, almost forgot. I want to burn these two gunpowders in a straight line. I have 40 grains stretched out. You guys decide for yourself if one is faster burning than the other. This gunpowder is the gunpowder that I made with my groundwater without distilling it. Let's see the burn rate compared to the gunpowder I made with the groundwater that I distilled myself. So here's the gunpowder with my groundwater that I distilled myself. So judging from myself, I think that's a little bit faster. Okay, just so that I have a record for myself, this 100 grams of gunpowder, after milling it about 8 hours, maybe 8.5, I stopped the mill, popped the lid off, and about half of it was already compacting on the bottom. Okay, so I took a stick, stirred it all up, run it for another hour. Same thing. So I did that every hour to 12 hours. Okay, so from 8.5 to 12 hours or so, I stopped the mill, stirred it all back up so that I could get a really good mill on it. Okay, so I want to show you what it looks like right now in the bottom of the container. And I think the reason why it's a little loose and fluffy right now is because I have to take, a stick and a hammer and drive that lid off. But you friends should be able to determine for yourselves that that gunpowder is pretty well compacted on the bottom, which, we've all convinced ourselves this is when it's ready to be pucked. And I have decided to use a 50-50% mixture, 50% my distilled groundwater with 50% acetone. So I'm going to get busy doing that, and we'll just see you here in just a moment or two, because I want to give you my first impressions of what the pucks look like compared to just using straight water, and or compared to using that 91% alcohol in a previous video. So like the CIA method, when you get the slurry made and you put it in a cloth and you wring all the excess water and acetone out, I'm accomplishing the same thing right here. The excess water and acetone is coming out through the bottom of my pucking die. So for those that think I'm losing the value of the potassium nitrate by doing this, ask yourself the same question regarding the method used for the CIA. When you wring it out, are you not losing the value of the water and or excuse me, the value of the potassium nitrate? I would think so, but you make up your own mind, friends. Okay, there's my piston, and I know that it's got enough liquid in it to push through the puck, because I generally do not have this much slurry that's coming back up from the, between the walls of the piston and the pucking die. So I know that I've got more than enough liquid in what I'm doing. And I'm also mixing up smaller batches, recognizing the evaporative value of the acetone. But I want to try one thing here before I continue on. Now this is my stirring stick, and I cleaned this off before I started mixing everything, because I want to try this with a match. Now remember, or keep in mind, this is still moist. It's not completely dry. Come on. All right. Hopefully you caught that as I was moving it away. It went off pretty damn quick, even wet. So, am I on the right track? You decide for yourself. I'm going to continue pucking some more, and I'll interrupt when I get enough pucks to show you what they look like and give you my first impressions on those. Well, guys, I got some good news and I got some bad news. What do you want first? Here's the good news. I got drawn for deer this year. Even better news. My brother got drawn for elk. That's 2 years in a row he got drawn for elk. That was his first choice. My deer hunt was my third choice. But here's the bad news. The dates overlap. So I'm not going elk hunting with my brother this year. Go figure, right? Okay, here's the plate that I use on the bottom of my pucking die. And as you can see, there's a slurry left behind. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to scrape it off, and then I'll do a burn test. As far as the other pucks, well, give me just a moment and I'll get them. Okay, here's the pucks. 1-inch pucks, varying sizes, varying depths. And I typically get 18 pucks. I got 17. One of them is really, really, really thin. I've got another one here that's, maybe about twice as thick as that first one. The color is what I normally get when I puck with water only. So, that didn't change. So, I guess what I'm going to do now is set these in the sun for the day, let them dry, and do another burn test and see if we can determine if this is actually a good way of going. I will tell you, give me another moment. So this is my spray bottle that I use to wet my gunpowder. Every time I start with a full bottle, because I kind of want to see how much liquid I use and to see if I can remain consistent in my water usage. Now, as I mentioned earlier, 50% acetone, 50% my groundwater that I actually distilled myself. And as you saw earlier in the video, I even showed it to my wife without telling her which one was which, to pick out which one was a cleaner burning. And obviously it was the piece of metal that I had done the burn with my distilled groundwater. So I think that question settled. From here on out, I'm using my own distilled groundwater. Now, I will tell you, from past experience, I did use a little bit more liquid in wetting down the gunpowder, as I mentioned earlier, keeping in mind the evaporative nature of acetone. If you were to put a ruler on here and bring this up, say like another 1/4 of an inch, that's how much water, acetone that I used, about 1/4 of an inch more than what I normally use. And as you could see, it produced a pretty good slurry in the pucking process. So I'm going to go get this stuff dried off, and break it up and grind it, and we'll do some more tests, so stay tuned for that. Alrighty, it's been a day and a night. This piece of metal sat on the dashboard of my truck all day yesterday to dry out what is the slurry. So I'm going to take a moment, scrape it off, and then we're going to do a burn, and we'll just see how potent the slurry is. Stay tuned. So there's that pile of slurry, so let's put a match to it. So as you probably observed for yourself, it was a little slow burning, but it did burn. But what was left behind on the board? Well, judge for yourselves. Let the camera focus in on it. And I'll tell you from right here, it's a little yellow in color, which would indicate to me it would be more sulfur than potassium nitrate. But it's still burnt, and it still produced a flame. So anyhow, just judge for yourself, guys. I'm not going to tell you how to interpret this, but just interpret it any way you want. Really doesn't matter. So what I'm going to do now is go into my shop, and I'm going to start breaking up the pucks, and I'll let you know then my impression as to whether they're really compacted really tight or not, using the acetone combined with the water. So at this point, probably like you, I'm curious to see if they break up the way they normally do when I use just straight water. Again, 50% water, 50% acetone. So let's see if they break up like they do when it's just straight water. First impression, yes. Okay, they seem to break up as they normally would when I just use straight water. So I'm going to go to town, get all these pucks broken up, run a few of them through the coffee grinder so I can begin sizing them, and when I get enough 3F to do a burn test, we'll do a burn test, so stay tuned. So there's 40 grains of the gunpowder I just made. That was pucked with 50% water, 50% acetone, and bear in mind that I expect this to burn a whole lot cleaner than that slurry gunpowder did. So let me get a match lit and we'll see what happens. Well, you guys, as surprised as I am, that stuff went up pretty damn quick, but how did it fare on the piece of metal? Judge for yourselves. Kind of smoky. A lot of smoke, in my opinion, left behind on the piece of metal, but I don't see any white chunks. There are darker chunks on it. I don't think the camera can pick it up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same test on the board and see how that 40 grain burns in a straight line, and then I'll do a side-by-side comparison with this piece of metal and the one I did the other day with just my groundwater that I distilled myself. And bear in mind, this is using my groundwater that's been distilled. So let me get reset up and we'll see if it burns just as quick. Stay tuned. Okay, there's the same 40 grains in a straight line. Let's see how quick this can go up. Well, guys, judge for yourselves. I think it went up pretty quick. What does the board look like? Well, judge for yourselves. Pretty clean, isn't it? I don't see any particles left behind per se. It's smoky, yeah, there's a lot of smoke left behind, but that's pretty clean. So just maybe the way to go is 50% my distilled groundwater and acetone. But let me get the camera repositioned and we'll look at those two metal pieces side by side and we'll wrap this up. Okay, this piece right here on the left, that is the burn, 40 grains of the gunpowder that I pucked with 50% my groundwater distilled and 50% acetone. This piece right here on the right, that is the gunpowder that I pucked with the groundwater only that I distilled myself. Looking at both of these side by side, the piece on the left that has the acetone in it left a lot more smoke behind, a smoky film, as opposed to the gunpowder that had just the distilled water. But either way, guys, both these pieces are clean. The only difference is that one, the gunpowder that I pucked with the 50% water, 50% acetone, left a little bit more smoke behind. So in either case, I would be just as satisfied using both, but for the sake of quick and fast burning, definitely the gunpowder that was pucked with the 50% water and the acetone burnt, in my opinion, a lot quicker. And obviously, I'll have to go back and watch this whole thing and make a better judgment. But as of right now, I'm of the mind that the 50% acetone to the water seems to be a lot quicker burning gunpowder. So anyhow, friends, decide for yourselves. I hope that you've enjoyed what I presented here, and I certainly hope that you'll take a moment or two to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing, and please share this with your bestest of buds. So long for now. Bye.